Welcome to another episode of Leadership Lessons. My guest today is Monica Henderson, and we're going to talk together about the new pro-life battle. Monica, thank you for joining Leadership Lessons.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Let me tell you some things about Monica. Monica Henderson currently serves as the Executive Director of Bside U for Life. It's a pregnancy and life skills center here in Louisville. She also serves as a consultant for nationwide CareNet pregnancy centers, focusing on risk management, legal issues, organizational excellence, and development. Monica has a law degree from the University of Louisville School of Law, and before her time with Bside U for Life and CareNet, she was an attorney in Louisville for nearly a decade. So, Monica, tell us just briefly how you came to know Jesus and how you got to the pro-life work from your work as an attorney.
Sure. Well, first of all, I was raised Catholic, so I was in church every weekend. I grew up knowing the name of Jesus my entire life. And my extended family remains Catholic. Interestingly, both my parents almost went into the vocations. My dad spent 2 years in seminary thinking he was going to become a priest. My mom spent 3 weeks in a convent thinking that she was going to become a nun.
Wow. And
they saw the light and realized that they were not called to vocational ministry in the Catholic Church. And fortunately for me and my brother, they ended up together, happily married, and relatively devout. But in my teen years, I started questioning the teachings of the Catholic Church. And the long story made very, very short is I pursued Baptist undergraduate education, was discipled well there. And ultimately, I count my coming to Christ as the day I was praying for friends of mine that were missionaries in Romania around May of '92. So it's a journey. A lot of people talk about progressive sanctification. I kind of claim sort of probably a not doctrinal view of progressive justification because it was such a long journey.
Yeah. Wow. And so then you went to law school, became an attorney. How did you move from being an attorney to being involved in pro-life work?
Yeah, without going into too many details, I kind of figured out about 9 years into private practice that big law firm life was not for me. There were a lot of factors that played into that, one of which was serving as pro bono counsel to my church, which at the time had gone through a leadership crisis. And I realized that my favorite part of the job was the nonprofit and ministry counseling work that I did. Mm-hmm. And in my quote unquote crisis of faith in the legal profession, it led me to pursue a ministry job, and the position of executive director of then a Woman's Choice Resource Center in Nicole's Place came open. I interviewed and I got the job. It's more complicated than that, and God opened the door and blessed it in a lot of different ways, but that's it was recognizing that big law life was not for me and that I wanted to be in ministry.
So, Monica, there's 100 things you could have done in nonprofit world besides what you're doing. Why advocating for life? Why is that so important to you personally?
I'd always been sort of passively pro-life. There were things in my job and things in the legal profession that did not cater to that. But like when I was at the law firm, I prayed in front of the abortion clinic with 40 Days for Life once. When the job opened up, I had remembered learning about Nicole's Place, the life skills side of the ministry, thinking that was a great addition to pregnancy care work. Mm-hmm. But really, it kind of comes down to the fact that it's an Imago Dei issue. You know, we shall not murder, and we are made in the image of Christ, made in the image of God. And, we're called to love our neighbors, including neighbors in the womb. So there's so many aspects of gospel ministry that are touched on in pregnancy care that you just can't deny it. I mean, the most famous unplanned pregnancy in the universe was Mary and Jesus and Joseph. So it's fundamental.
A lot's changed in recent years regarding abortion. From your perspective, how has abortion in Kentucky and America changed since the 2022 Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe versus Wade?
Yeah, I think it's exposed a lot of division at all levels, inside the church, inside politics, inside our community. And I think it's exposed the fact that the pro-life world, the church, was not ready for the overturn of Roe, which we can get into further in our discussion. And it's exposed the fact that Americans weren't as pro-life as they claimed to be. Mm-hmm. So it's unleashed a lot of challenges, certainly a lot of blessing and benefit, but a lot of challenges just across the pro-life spectrum.
So let's talk about that a little bit more. Abortion has shifted to a state-by-state battle. There have been more losses, it feels like, than wins in the last couple of years. What does that tell you about where Americans are and the task that's facing pro-life folks today?
Yeah, I think that depending on the jurisdiction, the landscape in a particular state makes it really challenging on a lot of different levels. So obviously in a pro-abortion state like California, New York, the pro-life community is really at odds with an abortion-addicted culture. And I use that term intentionally. You know, California and New York and states like Minnesota, they are abortion-addicted. And then you have states like Kentucky, where it's very abortion-restricted, and each has their own challenges. And whereas before they might have joined and locked arms together to fight the battle, they're kind of self-focused now. You know, like people in Kentucky want to support California pro-life, but we've got our own issues to deal with. Mm-hmm. You know, like for example, a very pro-abortion governor who has a very pro-abortion platform, and it's launched him into the national spotlight. But my colleagues in California have a target on their back. You know, the attorneys generals are trying to attack pregnancy centers, which is incredibly ironic that the most abortion-addicted states are the most aggressive in their attacks of pregnancy centers. So, I'm sorry.
No, I just want to ask you, could you explain that term abortion-addicted a little further?
It's a little bit facetious. But when you have governors like the governor of California actually putting billboards across state lines advertising that people can come to California and get their abortions paid for, it just shows that a certain segment of our culture and certain geographic, you know, political divisions or jurisdictions like California have idolized abortion mm-hmm. as a quote unquote right, to the point where they're paying for it for their own citizens. They're allegedly paying for it for out-of-state citizens. There are people who are donating to abortion funds in every single state to pay for impoverished women to get abortions. The fact that there are international organizations dedicated to putting abortion pills in the hands of women, even just in case, mm-hmm. not because they're currently pregnant, but just in case they get pregnant, that just shows how devoted to this, you know, practice of death people are.
Yeah, it feels almost like a religion a little bit when you watch just kind of the media and how it's handled. The term abortion addicted, I wondered if you were thinking about that it's just become a birth control for a lot of people, where back in the 70s it would not have been that case, early 70s, and then since then it's a way to say, hey, this didn't go the way I wanted it to. It's not what I had planned, and abortion is an option.
Yeah, I think abortion as birth control is definitely part of it, but there are also activists. I think of Jessica Valenti, who has the Substack titled "Abortion Every Day." They define a woman's ability to be autonomous and free to her ability to have unfettered access to abortion. Mm-hmm. And it's a sad state on our society and on womanhood in general for people to think your identity is tied to your ability to kill your child at will for your convenience, for your whatever they, you know, their enraptured love of quote unquote autonomy. I mean, it's so culturally opposed to what Scripture says, what the church teaches about life. And I think a lot of people who, for those who this issue is not paramount, they're unaware. Right. You know, we had a group of a Bible study group from one of the local churches come in and serve a meal to our clients in our life skills ministry, because we serve lunch every day. And they were going on a tour with some of our staff afterwards. And several of those women did not even know that there was such a thing as an abortion pill. Mm. So it's pretty dramatic. I mean, one change since Dobbs, you asked about this earlier, is if you had to go to an abortion clinic here locally to get abortion pills pre-Dobbs, it probably cost between $500 and $700 to get that quote unquote health care. You can order them online from $0 to $150 now.
Wow.
So it's mail order, it's cheaper. Like every aspect of abortion pill access has dramatically changed since Dobbs.
So let's talk about the abortion pill. The chemical abortion has changed the landscape. Although Kentucky's biggest abortion clinic was shut down, and we're grateful for that, doesn't mean there's no abortions taking place in Kentucky because it's moved into the privacy of homes. Tell us more about that reality, Monica.
Yeah, even leading up to Dobbs, there had been a shift from surgical to chemical abortions. Like right before Dobbs, chemical abortions had taken over as the majority of abortions in the United States. So the pill had been legalized as a prescription, drug with a black box warning. It required, you couldn't just go into a pharmacy and get it. You had to go to a medical provider. Since Dobbs, there's been a dramatic move by some of the purveyors of the pill, those who support abortion, easy abortion access, to make it available to women. And if you go to some of these websites, particularly the one promoted by Plan C, it will tell you that you can get them just in case. Like that culture promotes, and the purveyors promote getting abortion pills just in case. Yeah. So in the past, women would go to a provider to get the abortion pill. Now they are encouraged to order them in advance so that they'll have them when they get pregnant, not after they get pregnant.
Monica, what do you think can be done about chemical abortion? What can be done at a state level, if anything, or is it a federal issue?
Generally speaking, control of prescription medications is federal. I know that many states, including Kentucky, have outlawed abortion pills. There are many pro-abortion doctors across state lines that have those states have passed amnesty or whatever it's called, provisions where you can't prosecute a doctor in Massachusetts for sending or approving pills to be distributed in Kentucky. But there's a lawsuit in Texas right now challenging that because of harm done by interstate pill trafficking. Unfortunately, the FDA has had no backbone in this area. They don't have any interest in this area. Their interest will be in undermining every state regulation of the abortion pill because, generally speaking, prescription drug regulation is a national issue. They want to preempt it. Pro-abortion forces want to preempt abortion pill regulation and keep it federal. And with President Trump's appointees to the FDA, there's no guarantee that anything will happen, given that President Trump doesn't seem to have an interest in promoting a national policy, and his appointee is historically, been known to be pro-choice. So states can continue to outlaw it, but the purveyors of the pill will continue to undermine those state regulations.
So, Monica, abortion was a medical procedure that was done in a clinic like the EMW clinic in Louisville or other places. Now it's moved to a person at home taking a pill. What, from your knowledge, what's the experience like for a woman who is trying to end a pregnancy, trying to end a life through an abortion pill? What's she going through at home when that's happening?
Well, a lot's going to vary depending on the gestational age of the fetus, of the baby. It's obviously going to be more complicated and gruesome if the baby is more developed because the way the pill works is the first pill cuts off the food to the baby. That's a progesterone interrupter, and that's what kills the baby. And then the second pill is what expels it from the uterus. So the medical complications that can result from that is hemorrhaging, and obviously if it's an ectopic pregnancy, it could possibly lead to death or the rupture of the fallopian tubes. I mean, there's all kinds of complications that can come from it. But basically, the woman is turning her bathroom into her abortion clinic. So some of the challenges that come is when the baby passes and there's fetal tissue, what does she do with that?
Right.
Does she flush it? Does she try to bury it? In some jurisdictions, does she get in trouble if she tries to do something outside of her home with it. I mean, it can be pretty devastating. And then if it's not successful, that's when it's caused complications. It's led to sepsis. Some of the more well-known cases of abortion pill failure or complications are those that women have gotten terribly sick from self-administered abortions without proper medical care.
So switching to what you do, you lead a pregnancy and life skills center, pregnancy resource center here in Louisville. How has the overturning of Roe, how's that impacted your work?
In some respects, it hasn't impacted it at all. We keep doing what we're doing no matter what the state of the law is. And I think that's true for most pregnancy care ministries around the state. For us, we have seen our traffic increase. Between 2021, just before Dobbs, up until 2024, our pregnancy client traffic has doubled. Right after the Dobbs decision, traffic on our mobile unit doubled in the month right after Dobbs. So the irony is, I think a lot of pro-life supporters thought, oh, we overturned Roe, victory, let's move on to the next whatever. And what they don't realize is a change in the law does not change behavior, at least when it comes to pregnancy and sexual activity. So it didn't end pregnancy, it didn't end abortion. And for those who chose not to go online and buy pills and chose not to cross state lines, it means that pregnancy care centers services are in higher demand, and that's definitely true for us.
So if your services are in higher demand, that means your expenses are all increasing and going up. There are about 50 pregnancy resource centers across the state of Kentucky. How can churches step in and be a source of help to organizations like Bside U for Life?
There's a couple of different ways. Obviously, financial support is important. I have a colleague who used to run a center in North Carolina, and when she started, the church support of her ministry was about 10 or 15% of her budget. When she left, it was 85% of her budget. That was direct funding from churches, which is amazing and miraculous. Our church support has gone down over the last couple of years. It used to be about 20% of our budget. Now it's about 11%. And that's probably come about partly, I would say, mostly because of COVID and just changing priorities. So obviously financial support is important, but also a realization that our clients need church homes and they're not comfortable going to church. They feel judged, even though I think it was the Lifeway and CareNet joint study, 5 or 6 years ago, and it was pre-COVID, that said most women were in church the month before they got their abortion. A majority of women were in church before they got their abortion, but they didn't feel comfortable enough when they found out they were pregnant to go back to church. And I think that's an indictment on the church. I think that if women felt comfortable going to church when they are in crisis, no matter what the crisis is, then maybe abortion wouldn't be their first choice. But the problem is the church is not welcoming to pregnant women. I alluded to the notion that the most famous unplanned pregnancy was Mary with Jesus, but our churches do not view women the way Joseph did when he found out the truth. Obviously they're not married, they're not carrying the Savior, but the generosity, the true religion of James 1, single mothers, unwed pregnant women are the widows and their children are the orphans in the modern age. And women who are pregnant do not feel welcome at church. And the church doesn't want to support them. I mean, that's just the truth of the matter. They're expensive. It's messy. They want to do the baby bottle campaign and send a check and a pack of diapers to the pregnancy center with all their prayers, but they don't realize that single moms, about 70 to 75% of single moms are unchurched. That is a extremely large segment of our society that is an unchurched people group.
So let me just jump in here. So this isn't a pushback, but it's part of a discussion. I don't know a single church that would agree with your statement that churches don't want these ladies in their church. But that's the perception of these women that you're describing.
Right.
The churches have a different perception of themselves. They would say, most churches I know church where my membership is would say, man, we want you here. We want you to come here and hear the gospel. We want to see life change happen for you, and come alongside of you. So where do you think the disconnect is happening? Is it in the experience? Is it someone like just help us out? What do you hear from these ladies that you're working with?
Yeah, I think part of it is shame on behalf of the women, right? And their perception that church people are perfect. Mm-hmm. And even in your church right now, the non-pregnant woman looks around and thinks nobody's dirty here. Everybody's got it together, or they wouldn't be sitting in this pew next to me. Yeah. So it's true amongst our own members right now who we actively worship with, to think everybody else has their act together and they keep their own sin and shame a secret. Yeah. A woman who's pregnant doesn't get to keep her sin and shame a secret, because she's got a physical growth demonstrating her sin and shame coming out of her belly, right? And then after the birth, she's got the illustration of her sin and shame on her hip, mm-hmm. in her arms, crying in the pews. Yeah. So whereas the dude addicted to porn can keep his sin secret, or the woman who's got a gambling problem can keep that sin a secret, a single mom or a pregnant mom cannot keep that sin a secret.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I'm thinking the difference is probably if there's one champion for that lady. Like if you bring this young lady to church with you, I think I know the church you attend, and she sits with you even while the baby's developing in her womb and it's becoming obvious that she's expecting a child. She has you as a champion for her, a friend, a supporter. And then wouldn't it be true that others in your church would rally around her if they saw you as a champion for her? I'm not putting this on you. I'm just saying any Christian who champions somebody who's going through a struggle in their life, a bad decision, and just tries to walk with them, isn't it more common for others to kind of come around and say, okay, Monica's working with her. What could we do to help?
Yeah, I think that's where a church making a conscientious choice to do something related to pregnancy care is important. They choose to go through the Making Life Disciples curriculum from CareNet, or they choose to work with Embrace Grace and do Bible studies and support for pregnant women, or they work with Single Mom University and develop, Bible studies and support for pregnant women and single moms. And they advertise it, and they make it part of their DNA. Like some churches, they advertise their prison ministries on their website. Mm-hmm. They advertise their homeless ministries on their website. They recruit for, OCA, Orphan Care Alliance, and supporting adoption or adoption fundraisers, whatever. There's plenty of parachurch ministries out there that churches advertise, but very few churches, they might say that they partner with the local pregnancy center, which is great and needed, but they don't simultaneously say there should never be a reason for you to leave this church if you get unexpectedly pregnant. We support you. Yeah. We want anyone who gets pregnant unexpectedly to know that this church is a safe place for you.
Yeah, I think it's a good argument and a good illustration as well. A church that has a Celebrate Recovery ministry is communicating, you're welcome here. If you're going through, you've made bad choices, you're welcome in this place. I think you're right on target that for a church to become more welcoming to folks who've made bad decisions on pregnancies or the victim of somebody else's rotten action. Would start to communicate to people that this is a place where I'm welcome. Yeah.
Right.
So Monica, let's talk about adoption instead of abortion. How do you see foster care, adoption, and supporting single parents as part of this larger work? You mentioned Orphan Care Alliance, an organization here in Kentucky. How's that a right response to what's happening in the abortion industry?
Yeah, I absolutely think it's necessary and a plank. It's a pro-life plank, right? Mm-hmm. It's part of a comprehensive pro-life position that a church should have. I think in my time here, what I've learned is that from the woman's perspective, adoption is almost always the third option, and that's always such a shock. We do a monthly tour, and people say, well, what about adoption? I said, we absolutely train for and talk about adoption. But a study done, I think, by Focus on the Family back in the 90s, asked women in crisis pregnancies, what about adoption? And their answer was, it's a double death. The first death is, I got pregnant when I didn't mean to, and my life is over as I know it. And the second death is adoption means I've failed as a mother. So the church, I understand the church's position, but it's slightly delusional to think that adoption is as attractive to a woman in crisis as abortion or parenting. And so it's absolutely necessary for Christians to adopt, to enter into the foster care space, foster to adopt, and support all those ministries. The irony and strange point is, if single moms struggling with parenting were supported by the church, on the front end, fewer children would probably end up in foster to adopt situations, because the mom is more equipped to keep her children as opposed to struggling in poverty and losing their children because of poor decisions made in poor parenting situations. So it all needs to work together. Yeah. But preaching adoption is not going to change the heart of a woman in crisis, because she's not in your pews. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And what you're describing is that the primary alternative to abortion is parenting, is to have this child and receive the help from an organization like yours, or the help from a local church, to just be a parent, as difficult as that's going to be. Thanks for ringing that bell and clarifying that. I want to shift gears with the time we have left. We don't have much time. I just want to ask you about leadership. So when you went from an attorney to what you're doing now, you're an executive leader for an organization. What are some things that you had to learn about being a leader that were and you had to figure them out pretty quick?
I think the biggest lesson I've learned is that people part is the hardest part. Yeah, okay. Attorneys, by definition, I think attorneys are terrible people managers. As a general rule, and I'm in touch with attorneys, and I know this to still be the fact that a lot of attorneys don't manage people very well. And so I think that's true. I think leaders have to understand how to engage with their direct reports and everybody in their ministry, to be, sympathetic, empathetic, good listeners, get buy-in and consensus build. And attorneys are used to winning, right? They're used to negotiating and winning. I was a transactional attorney, and, building consensus for me was like, does everybody agree to this term in the loan agreement, or does everybody agree to this term in, these complicated real estate transactions? But even something as ridiculous as when we're going to have our weekly staff Devo, and if we're going to go live instead of Zoom, now that we're 5 years from COVID, those kind of things matter to people. And so being able to just be attuned to your staff and know what they need is a really important part of leadership that I had to learn.
Monica, what's something that if you go back and start over or talk to your younger self when you were just starting in this work, what's something you would say to yourself today to help in that area?
I think part of it, you can't be a lone ranger. It's lonely at the top. There's plenty of conversations that you can't have as an executive leader. Yep. And so it's valuable to either have a really good executive coach or a group of fellow executive directors that you can bounce ideas off of, and colleagues, state networks, national networks. I think people might come into a new job thinking, this is, my experience. I'm an attorney. I know what I'm doing. I can get this thing going. I know what to do. And I did have a lot of built-in respect because I had a JD behind my name. But I think that being able to network with like-minded ministries, and even ministries that don't have anything to do with pregnancy care. Yep. I had breakfast with some executive directors that weren't pregnancy care people on a pretty regular basis, and it was a safe place for us to just bounce ideas off and talk about what our struggles were. So I think knowing that you're not alone is pretty important. So it sounds like a professional cohort, whether intentional or more casual, was something that was helpful. What's something else that has helped you grow and develop as a leader since you've been in this role? I alluded to this a minute ago, was just getting a coach. Yeah. Fortunately, a colleague said, I got this coach, give him a try. It wasn't a good fit for me. But eventually my board realized that I shouldn't be paying for coaching out of my own pocket. Yeah. And so they set aside some money for me to have an executive coach. And I've gone through several, and I've also done leadership cohorts and mastermind groups.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so. Always learning, always having a mindset of being willing to learn is super important. We don't know all the answers. We can always learn from even the pregnancy center with the shortest schedule, the smallest staff, and the fewest clients. I have something I can learn from them.
Monica, every leader has strengths and weaknesses, and every leader has lots of room for improvement, no matter what he or she is trying to lead. Two things I love about your work and you as a leader and your kind of your cohorts in that work is that the executive directors for the Kentucky Pregnancy Resource Centers that I've been around, they are very impressive leaders. They have to wear a lot of hats. They have to manage a staff. They have to be fundraisers. They have to have a compassion for the ladies and clients that they're serving. And then also the second thing is just the work that you're doing and how you're stepping in to help these ladies and families in a time of crisis. So thank you for your ministry, for your leadership example, and thanks a lot for joining Leadership Lessons.
Thanks for having me. It's been a real pleasure and an honor.
Thanks for listening to Leadership Lessons. An audio podcast of this program is available on both Apple and Android devices. The Kentucky Baptist Convention was created by churches, for churches, to help churches reach Kentucky and the world for Christ. For more information about the KBC and the cooperative program which fuels our ministry, go to kybaptist.org.